What if Squid Game was a board game? Would you play? Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Clayton and I love talking about board games. In this video, we're going to be talking about Squid Game being turned into a board game. Now, how do you ask can a Squid Game be turned into a board game? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because in this video, I'm going to be replacing the 6 games that are in Squid Game the show with 6 mini board games that can fit in one giant game of Squid Game. The standard rules of Squid Game are very simple. 1, they gotta be very easy to play, like children games. 2, you cannot kill the other player, that would be madness. And number 3, the game's gotta seem fair to everyone. Now with that being said, this game is not tested, this is simply just an idea I'm throwing out there for anyone that wants to take it and go ahead and run with it. Everything I show you in this video is made on Tabletop Simulator, which can be found on Steam. Now, let's start off with the first game with red light, green light. The easiest game I could come up with to replace this one is Snakes and Ladders. I'm sure most of you know how to play Snakes and Ladders, but to break this down on how to turn it into a Squid Game form is the board is made up of green and red squares mixed up with other colors on the board to represent red light, green light. And of course, similar to red light, green light, this game will be timed for 15 minutes. There will also be a deck of 10 cards that will also have green and red, with 4 cards being red and the 6 being green. Now all players would choose dice in this game. The dice in the game will have 4 symbols: square, circle, triangle. Circles will let you move 1 space, triangles will let you move 3, and squares will let you move 4. There's also going to be an X symbol, and if you roll an X, you can no longer roll that dice, and they're forced to stop. And after everyone's turn is done, you flip the top card of the deck. If it is a red card and you are on a red square, you go back to the beginning of the game. If you land on a green square and a green card is flipped, you get to jump to the next green square. Players would take turns rolling the dice and moving their character up along the board. The player that can make it the first in 15 minutes would win the game, or if they make it all the way to the end. Also, depending on where a player lands, will determine how many points they would earn in the game. Now moving on to game number 2, where you have to rip out your own shape from some type of object. I feel like the best method to use this for a board game version is everyone would get a card with a shape on it. The same shapes that are in the show. However, what I would do is give more points to the hardest shape, and I would have players roll a dice to determine what shape they would get. This would keep it as fair as possible, because if you know the game, then you're going to obviously choose triangle every single time. Now what players would have to do is rip the shape from the card as best they can. If a player rips the shape in any way, they lose the game, and they cannot gain any points in this round. However, to keep it fair and fun, they can still advance to the next game. Alright, that brings us to game number 3, Tug of War. Now how can Tug of War be turned into a board game? I feel like there's either 2 options you can go with. You can either take the popular card game War and kind of turn that into a game, and you would turn 2 people against each other, and the first player to eliminate another player would gain points. And you would continue doing this until all players were eliminated. Or you can make this a simple rock, paper, scissors game with cards, triangles being scissors, squares being paper, and circles being rock. Now, you would face off against an opponent, either an AI system maybe, where you guess a card at random, or another player that you're playing with. If you win a game of rock, paper, scissors, you gain 1 point. The first player to win 10 points wins the game. If a player does not reach 10 points, they just keep the points that they did get and move on to the next round. Obviously, the next game can be very simple because it's very light in components. You can just play marbles. However, there was one game that was on the show that bugged me that they didn't even play at all, and that is hide and seek. And that's what I would replace this game with, making it a little bit more challenging. There is one board game that I can think of that does this really well. Shadows in the Forest. This is a 1 versus many game where one player plays as a lantern and everyone plays shadowlings hiding in a forest behind trees. Now in this game you would turn the lights off. One player is playing as a lantern trying to shine light on the other players. The other players are hiding around the board behind trees. Players are eliminated once a light is shined on them. Keeping with the theme of Squid Game, lantern player could be playing as like a red guard that has light that shines through them, and the other players can be playing as just simple meeples. I feel like each player should have a certain value of points on them, and if they are eliminated, that player that's playing as the guard gains that point. If there are any players still outstanding, let's say after 5 minutes, then they gain those points. Now how they would move through the board is simply by rolling dice and choosing a path. Once they choose a path, they must continue down that path. Also, once a certain character is found, other players may choose to move the hiding spots. The guard player must leave the room or close their eyes so they can't see where the new hiding spots. The player that's in currently last place for this game would play as the lantern, and the other players would have to try to hide around the board. Now moving on to game number 5, which is clearly the hardest game of them all. However, there's only one game I can think of that pushes your luck just as much as it is to guess what tile to move forward. That is zombie dice. How this would work is there are a certain amount of dice in a bag, and they're easy, medium, and hard dice to roll. And you would roll those dice and you earn points, circles being 1, triangles being 3, squares being 4. Just keeping the same amount of rules, and if you roll an X, you can no longer roll that dice, and you lose your turn when you roll 3. The first player to reach 18 points at the end of the game wins. It's a super simple push your luck dice game, and I think that's a good choice to replace this one. If you guys have a better game in mind to replace this that's simple and easy, let me know down in the comment section below. Now let's talk about game number 6, probably the hardest game to kind of think about to turn into a board game, the Squid Game. Now the only game I can really think of that I think would be a lot of fun to kind of mimic off this would be Ice Cool, but instead of penguins, you're just playing as your character that you can flick. I would take the last 2 players with the highest points to play off against each other, and these would be the players that can win the game. The player with the highest points obviously would get to choose if they want to be the attacker or the defender. The attacking player's rules are simple. They cannot touch the borders of the squid and must make it to the head of the squid in order to win the game. The defender can do anything in their means on their turn to block the player. To kind of change it up a little bit, I would make sure there's components that the defending player can use to block the path in order for the attacking player to reach the head of the squid. Also, I would do this turn by turn, starting off with the defending player setting up how they want the board to be, and then the attacking player gets a turn to flick their character to try to reach the board. If the attacking player reaches the head of the squid, they win Squid Game, and the defending player, as long as they can hit their character and hit their attacking player into the border of the squid, then they win the game. Basically, with every game that I've mentioned so far, the components are very simple. Cards, dice, 1 or 2 game boards. The most complex component is that lantern for hide and seek. You can even add the marbles games if you would like. That's what I tried to come up with in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Give this video a like. Let me know what games you guys would replace in the comment section down below. I'll be happy to hear your guys' thoughts. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.